Today, we're going to build a complete React portfolio application. You'll see a clean homepage with 2 buttons that navigate to a team page and a contact page. On the team page, we'll display team members and link their social profiles. And on the contact page, users can reach out to the company. While building this project, you'll learn core React concepts like routing, navigation, props, and state. So let's get started, guys. Let's get started by creating a new React project. So right-click the desktop, open in terminal, npm create vite add latest, followed by the name of the project. In our case, we can say portfolio or portfolio minus project, like so. We're going to choose React as a framework. Let's use plain JavaScript. No, yes, and let's wait for the installation to finish. So now everything is set up. So let's start Visual Studio Code, like so. Let's go to File, Open Folder. Let's navigate to our desktop. And on our desktop, let's open the portfolio project, like so. Let's select this folder. And now we open the portfolio project right here. We can close this terminal right here and let's open a new terminal. So terminal, new terminal, and we actually need a command prompt. So let's click this arrow and let's open a command prompt. Right here, we can now say npm run dev to start the server. Let's click this first link to open our project. And we're seeing the standard template right here. Let me just go to our app.jsx. Let's actually just delete our app.jsx and app.css. We don't need those files anymore, so press delete, move to recycle bin, and now let's create a new pages folder. And inside of this folder, we'll have all of our pages. For this project, we will have a home page, so home.jsx. We will have a team page, so team.jsx. And we will have a contact page, so contact.jsx. Let's create a basic template for every single page. So const home is going to be equal to an arrow function, like so. We're going to export default home. Let's save that one. Const contact is going to be equal to this function, export default contact, like so. And let's do the same for team. So const team is going to be equal to this arrow function and export default team. So now we created all of those components. So somehow we now need to make sure that we display all of those components on the right pages. So we need a router. In order to get a router, let's create a new terminal or a new command prompt to be precise. And let's say npm I react router DOM. So we're going to install React Router DOM to implement routing. Within our main.jsx, we can now remove our app because we will not have that one anymore since we deleted it. And instead, we need to define a router. So const router is going to be equal to create browser router. We need to import the create browser router method from React Router DOM, as you can see. So let's click that one. This is going to be a method, and this method expects an array that includes all of our routes. So let's pass an array right here that includes objects that define our routes. The first object is going to have a path property that is going to be a slash. So this will target our normal URL. And if we are getting to that page, so if the user just uses the normal URL, then we want to display our home page. So let's import home, our home component from ./pages/home, and display that one as an element. Now let's also define another path for our team page, so /team. The element that we're going to render in that case is going to be our team component from ./pages/team. And as a third route, we're going to define a path for /contact, like so. And the element is going to be contact. We also need to import that one. And now this right here should work. Now we also need to provide that routes. And in order to do so, we need a router provider. So let's get the router provider from React Router DOM, like so. This can be a self-closing tag because we only need to pass our router right here as a property. So router is going to be equal to this router that we defined right here. And now our routes should actually work. So if we return something on our home page, for example, like a div that includes home, we should see it right here. At the moment, we're still having all of the basic styles, and I want to get rid of all of the basic styles. So I'm going to go to our index.css, which is our global style sheet. I'm going to select everything delete everything, and I'm going to create some base styles by using the universal selector. Margin is going to be 0, padding is going to be 0, box sizing is going to be border box. So now we can also go to /team, and we can also go to /contact, as you can see. This right here is going to throw an error though, because this route does not exist. So as you can see, everything seems to work as intended. Now the next thing that we want to do is get all of the images that we need for this project. And in order to get all of the images that you might want to use for this project, I will have a link for you inside of the description that will link my GitHub repository. And right here you can go within React-Portfolio to the source folder, and in there you will have the images folder, and the images folder will include all of the images. And you can essentially go ahead and download all of those files. Once you've downloaded all of the files, you can just create an images folder within our source folder. So images, like so. And now I can just take all of those images, so girl.png for example, and I'm going to drag them into the images folder. Once done, your images folder should look something like this, but you do not have to use the exact same images. I'm just going to use those ones, but feel free to use your own images or just take a look at how I am doing it. The first thing that we want to do is create a nav bar, because we will need the nav bar on every single page. So on the team, home, and contact page, we will create the nav bar as a component that we can reuse over and over again. So we'll create a components folder, and inside of this components folder, let's create nav bar.jsx. Let's create the component, so const navbar is going to be equal to an arrow function. We're going to return a div for now, and we're going to export default navbar, like so. And now let's import this navbar on our home page. So instead of home, let's output our navbar, like so. We need to import that one. Same goes for our team page, so let's return a div, and inside of this div we are having our navbar, like so. And again, the same goes for contact. So we'll return a div, and inside of this div we also have our navbar, like so. So now we reuse this navbar on every single page, and now we can, for example, output something right here, and this will work. To create a navbar though, we want to display a couple of links that allow us to jump from one page to another. In order to do so, we can use the nav link element provided by React Router DOM. So let's import that one. So we're importing nav link from React Router DOM. And instead of this nav link, we can have one nav link for home, one nav link for team, and one nav link for contact. Of course, at the moment, there's nothing really happening once we click on those links. So we need to define the to property. And this first nav link should redirect the user to / because that is our home page. The second nav link should redirect the user to /team. And the third nav link should redirect the user to /contact. So now the nav link should work. So let's go home, contact, and team, but we're not seeing a difference. So maybe if you take a look at the URL, you should see the difference. So contact, team, we're switching to team, and home, we're switching to our home page. And let's also create a paragraph right here. So P, that includes our logo, for example. In the end, we want to have the logo to the left and our nav items to the right. Let me also reset the size to 100% so you see how this really looks. Now I'm going to place all of those nav links inside of a div, like so. And I think at this point, it might make sense to start styling. So we're going to create another folder for our CSS. So CSS is going to be the folder name. And I'm going to create a module for our navbar. So navbar.module.css. And we create all of the styles that we need within this CSS file. First of all, we need to import this module as styles or within a styles object. So import styles from // we need to go one level up. Need to navigate into our CSS folder /navbar.module.css. And now we can use the styles object that will include all of our classes later on to define styles for every single element. So this div could, for example, have a class name of styles.navLinkContainer. Or let's just use navContainer. Let's copy navContainer, create a class for .navContainer, and let's say we want to have a display of flags and maybe a gap of 20 pixels. Let's also create a container for this entire navbar. So this div will have a class name of styles.container. We're going to target .container, And we will say that this will be display flags. So the items are right next to each other. Justify content, space between, and align items to center. I also want to have a little bit of padding into every single direction. So padding, top, bottom, maybe 20 pixels. Let's try 20 pixels into every single direction. And maybe I'm going to say left, right, 40 pixels. And I actually think it makes a little more sense to take a look at the website when being full screen from this point on. Now it might also make sense to style the logo as well as the nav links. So we can use a class for our logo as well. So class name styles.logo. We will create that class in a second. And our nav links will have a class name of styles.activeLink. We will also create an inactive link in a second. But for now, let's just copy that one and paste it in here. So let's create this active link class right here. Instead of navbar.module.css, let's target .activeLink, and let's also target .logo. And now I want to use a couple of colors, and I want to define those colors for the entire document. So I want every single module to have access to those classes that we will define as a variable. But we only want to define those variables one single time. We do not want to redefine them within every single file. And that is pretty simple inside of React, because as you know, we have this index.css, which is going to be our global style sheet that will affect the entire page. So every single component that you render within your page. And I'm going to create a couple of variables. So I say :root, and now I can define a variable that I can access anywhere else. So within every single module by saying -- followed by the variable name. So this could be primary minus color, for example. And now I can define a color like #FFF. But actually I prepared a couple of colors already. If you want to use the exact same colors, you can again go to my repository, to the index.css, and right here we have this :root that includes main, color, text color, and accent color. So let's just paste them in here. You don't have to use the exact same colors, but you can use the exact same colors if you like to. Also, I'll define a font family for the entire body. So I want to use the exact same font for the entire page essentially. So I'm going to use system UI. Let's save that one. And if we take a look at our page, the font family already changed. Instead of our navbar module.css, I can now say I want to have a font size of 3 rems, a font weight of bold. If I now want to use a color, I can just access a variable like so and say -- text minus color, for example. And text color, as you can see, is this weird colored. So in our case, I actually want to use main color. So I'm going to say main color like so. And now you can see that we used our main color right here for this logo. Let's also start to style this button right here, or this link to be precise. We are going to use a color of var, again -- main color. I want to have a text decoration of none. I want to have a font weight of bold, and I want to have a font minus size of 0.9 rem. Let me save that one, and now you can see that we're getting this effect. And in fact, let's say this here has a font size of 2.5 rem, and I'm only going to use 15 pixels right here. So now we're getting this effect. And I would also like to have a slightly bigger gap between those items. So I'm going to say gap will be 40 pixels. Now we're getting this effect. And actually the reason that we're not seeing anything right here is that I obviously need to use class name. I don't know why it just says name. There was probably a typo. So now we are having this effect. Now let me also create an inactive class for the links, because we want to see the difference between a page being active and inactive. So I'm going to say inactive right here. And I'm just going to remove font weight bold. And instead of color, main color, I'm just going to use gray right here. So a normal gray like this. And now we somehow need to check whether the link is active or not. And that is pretty simple within React, because navlink from React.DOM provides us with an isActive status. So we can, right here, destructure is active, like so. We can use an arrow function and we can check whether isActive is true. If isActive is true, so if we are currently on the home page, then we want to return styles.activeLink, and otherwise we want to return styles.inactiveLink. So if isActive is true, then we will use the active link style, and if isActive is false, so if we're not on the home page at the moment, then we will use the inactive link style. Let me just copy this class right here, so this class name, and let's just replace the other ones with that one, like this. And as you can see now, since we're on the home page, home will have the isActive class, whereas the other ones will not have the isActive class. And I'm actually going to add bold to our inactive link as well. So like this. And instead of pure gray, we're going to use it in a slightly lighter variation. And now we have this effect. And as you can see, the active page is always going to be the highlighted one. So it's always going to be a little bit darker because that is what we defined for our active class. Now let's start by creating our home page. And first of all, I'm going to close all of those pages. And on our home page, I want to have our image to the right and I want to have our text to the left. So I'm going to create another div. Now I create another div for the left and I create another div for the right. And to the right, I want to have our image. So I'm going to add an image right here. We need to import this image from our images folder. So I'm going to say import women from ... images / girl.png. And now I'm going to pass this girl as a source right here. Well, in our case, let me rename that to girl. Let's go to our home page. And as you can see, we're getting the girl right here. And now you might wonder why I'm not using a component in this case. I could of course subdivide this page further into components and so on, but I really want you to think about it. Obviously I could turn those ones into components. So I could create another component for the left, I could create another component for the right and so on. But whether you use a component or just essentially plain HTML really depends on the use case. In my case, I know that I'll never ever touch this code again. I always want to have this image right here. I'm not going to use this as a component. I will never reuse the right side as a separate component. So there's not really a point in creating a component in this case because I'm not going to reuse it anywhere else. And if something is not really reusable or you do not really plan to reuse it later on, then there's not really a point in creating a component. So you only want to create a component if you really have the intention to reuse that component later on somewhere. So in our case, this girl will later on be here to the right. And to the left, we want to have a little bit of text. So let's create an h2 right here. Right below, I want to have an h1. And this h2, for example, says, hey, I am an NPC. Right below, I want to have web designer, for example. And right below, I want to have a little bit of text. So I'm going to use lorem 30 to create some placeholder text. And right below, I want to have two buttons next to each other. And in that case, it makes sense to create a component because I want to reuse those buttons later on. So I'm going to create a button component right here that says button.jsx. I'm going to create const button, which is going to be equal to an arrow function. I'm going to return a button right here, and I'm going to export default button. This button will expect a text, so we're going to get a text whenever we use this component, and we can just render this text right here. Now we're also going to expect a onClick function that decides what the button is going to do. So right here we can destructure onClick, and let's say onClick is going to be equal to onClick. So the onClick button property is equal to whatever we pass to onClick as a prop. Let's save that one. Let's go to home and let's use this button right here. So button. This can be a self-closing tag that just expects a text. And the text can, for example, be about us. And right below, we can have contact, for example. On click, we will have some functions. That one is going to have the name handle go to about. And on click right here, we will call a function that has the name handle go to contact. We do not have those functions yet, so we need to create them. So const handle go to about is going to be equal to an empty arrow function for now. And const handle go to contact is going to be equal to an empty arrow function for now as well. If we take a look at our page right now, you can see that this is what this looks like. So I would really like to start styling everything. First of all, I want this entire container, so pretty much everything, to take up the entire available space. So 100% of the space. Then I want to have this text to the left and this girl aligned to the right. So basically those ones sitting next to each other. And I want to use different colors for the text and I want to have a different button style. So let's start by creating a height and a width of 100%. By saying that this wrapper div right here has a class name of styles.stylesClass. dot container. We don't have the styles object yet, so we need to create it. But in order to get this one, we first need to create a specific style sheet, a styles module to be precise, for our home page. So let's go to our CSS folder. Let's say home.module.css. And now we're going to import the styles by saying import styles from home dot, or in our case, let's go dot dot slash because we need to go one level up. Navigate to our CSS folder, home.module.css. And now styles should be available. Let's create dot container styles. We want to say that the width is 100% and the height is 100 viewport height. We want to have overflow of hidden, like so. So this entire container, so essentially everything, takes up 100% of the available width and height. Now I want this container, so the sub-container right here, that includes this text right here, as well as this image, to take up 80% of the available space, for example. And I want to use a flexbox so they're aligned next to each other. So I'm going to say that this container right here, below the navbar, has a class name of styles.subcontainer. I'm going to target our .subcontainer within our home.module.css. I'm going to say that I want to have a width of 80%, margin auto to center it. As you can see, I want to have a display of flex. So now they're aligned next to each other. And for the margin, I'm actually going to say auto for left and right, but to the top I want to have a little bit of margin. So I'm going to say let's use 80 pixels top, right auto, 0 bottom, left auto. Let me save that one, and now we are getting this effect right here. And I also want to align all of the items to the center. And instead of 80 pixels, I'm probably going to use 40 and align items off center. So now we get this effect right here. And that right here was probably not perfect. I'm just going to replace this with auto for now. So we're getting this effect. Now let's start to style this text right here. Let's go to our home.jsx and let's give every single element a class. So class name is styles.subheading, because right now this here is going to be our h2 and this here is going to be our h1. So our h1 will have the name styles.heading. This here is going to have the class name styles.subheading, and this here is going to have the class name of styles.infotext, for example. Now let's target all of this. So .subheading within our home.module.css will have a color of var. Let's use dash dash primary minus color. We're getting this color because we defined that one as a variable within our index.css, so main color. Let's take a look. You can see that we're actually this main color though, so I have to get this as main color. I'm going to replace primary color, and now we're getting this effect. I also think that a font weight of 400 would be a little bit better. And actually, let me try 500. So now this looks pretty good in my opinion. I want to say dot heading will have a font size of 3 rem. I also want to have a color of var dash dash main color. And actually I'm going to use 4 rem. And for the paragraph, so for .info text, I'm going to use a font size of maybe 0.9 rem and a color of var of main color as well. Let's take a look at the page so you can see that we're getting this effect. But I also think that this text right here takes up too much space. So I'm going to say that the max width is going to be 60 characters. And the normal width is going to be 100%. So if there is space available, which is less than 60 characters, then take up all of the available space. But if there's space available and you reached 60 characters, then go into a new line. And now we're getting this effect. I also want to have a little bit of space between those items. So for this flexbox, for the subcontainer, I need to say justify content, space between, to get some space between those items, like so. And now I would like to have a different color for designer right here. So for this designer word. So I'm going to put this designer word instead of a span. And I'm going to give this span a class name of styles.purple, for example. I'm going to target .purple within our home.module.css. So .purple will have a color of var of dash dash. Let's take a look. Dash dash text color. So I want to use dash dash text minus color. I'm going to save that one and we're getting this effect. I think we could use a little bit more space between all of those elements right here. So what we can do in order to fix that one is we can just say that our info text in this case will have a margin top of maybe 15 pixels and a margin bottom of maybe 10 pixels. So now we're having a little bit more space, and I think this looks a little bit better. Now we also need to style our buttons though. And to style our buttons, we will go to our button.jsx and we will create a new CSS file, a new module to style this button. So I'm going to say button.module.css. I'm going to import this module within our button. So import styles from /css/button.module.css. And as a class name, let me just use styles.btn. And let me say button filled. And the reason that we're going to use button filled is because I want to create two different button styles. I want to create one style, button filled, and I want to create one style, button outline. But let's for now start with a button filled. So .button filled will have a background, and I want to use var of -- main color right here for the background. And I want to use a color of white. Let's take a look at that. So you can see we're getting this effect right now. I would also like to use a font weight of bold, a padding top bottom of 10 pixels, left right of 40 pixels, a border minus radius of 5 pixels, a cursor of pointer, and let me save that one. And now we're getting this effect right here already. I think the border looks pretty terrible. So I'm going to say border 0. And for the padding, I'm maybe even going to use 50 pixels right here. So we're getting this effect. For the font size, I'm going to use 0.9 rem. I always think this looks a little bit better. 0.73. And this should be about alright. But now I also want to create an outline button. So how can we do that? We could, for example, say that we accept a property right here that has the name outline, so a prop to be precise. And if outline is going to be equal to true, then we want to use styles.button_outline. Otherwise, we want to use styles.button_filled. So we need to create this outline class. So .button_outline. And let's just copy all of those ones right here. And let's just adjust a couple of those settings. So we do not need a background in that case. We want to have a border of 1 pixel solid. And we want to use var. And as a color, we want to use this text color right here. So -- text minus color. For the color, I want to use the same color. So for the text color, so I'm going to replace white with our variable as well. And I think this should already be about it. So now all we have to do to get this outline style, we just need to set this outline property to true. So let's go to home.module.css, or to be precise, to our home page. And when passing our button right here, or when using our button right here, we need to pass the outline property and set that one to true. But I actually want to set it to true for our second button, so for this button. And now we're having this outline button. But actually the background, maybe we have to set it because it has this weird gray. So I'm going to say the background is going to be white. So now we're having this white button. Maybe we want to have a little bit of spacing between those buttons. And a lot of people would just add some spacing for every single button right here. So you could, of course, say, okay, margin left 20 pixels, margin left like so. And now this would work, but actually this is a terrible way of doing it, because maybe later on you want to use the same button on a different page, and then every single button has a margin left, which you obviously do not want. Maybe you want to use the other button on the other page with a different amount of margin, for example. So in order to style this properly, we're going to go to our home.jsx. We're going to wrap those buttons within another div. Instead of this div, we are having the buttons, and this div will now have a class name of styles.button container, for example. Now I'm going to copy this button container and I create a style for this button container of display flex, and I will just add a gap of 20 pixels. So now we're having a gap between those buttons. And now I could also say, let me give that one, this button container, a margin top of 20 pixels. And let's maybe even use 30 like so. And you can see we're getting this effect. Now, right below those buttons, I would like to have a couple of icons that redirect the user to Instagram, Twitter, and so on, for example. And since we want to use this component a couple of times, again, we have to create a component right here. So we can say this is going to be our social icon.jsx const social icon is going to be equal to this arrow function right here. I'm going to return a div. I'm going to export default social icon like so. And now I want to use the social icon 3 times on our home page. So right here I create a div, and inside of this div I want to have the social icon component, and I'm going to use it 3 times. And right now we only have an empty div. So I want to use a couple of icons, so I'm going to use React Icons. I'm going to select React Icons preview for IO. And I probably want to have an icon for Instagram, so I'm going to type Instagram right here. And I think FA Instagram looks pretty good. So I'm just going to import that icon on top right here. And now I want to pass this icon to our icon component. So how can I actually do this? I could say that I want to accept the icon right here within our social icon component as a prop. So I can say icon. Within this div, I'm just going to render my icon. And now I can, for example, say, let me close that one. For our home page, I'm going to pass to the first icon, for example, as a prop icon, or to the prop icon, my icon component, like so. So now, if we go to our page, you can see that we're getting the error because we did not install React Icons yet. So npm I react -icons, which will install React Icons. I'm going to save this, and now the error is gone, and you can see that we're having this icon right here. Now I can do the exact same for Twitter, for example. So let's search for Twitter right here, and I'm actually going to use X as an icon because that should currently be the Twitter icon. I'm going to import that one right here as well. And now, as an icon, let me just copy and paste that one in here. Instead of FA Instagram, I'm going to pass FAX Twitter right here. And now for the third one, we could, for example, say that we want to use YouTube. Doesn't really matter too much. So let me get this YouTube icon. Going to import that one right below as well. Actually, I can import that one right here. Can remove it right here. And now I'm just going to pass this component, this FA YouTube component, to our third social icon. Now let's take a look at our page. So this is what this looks like. Now I want to have a slightly different style. So I'm going to create a basic style for all of the icons within our social icon.jsx. First of all, I of course need to create a style sheet for this component. So I'm going to say icon.module.css. I'm going to import that icon CSS file instead of our social icon.jsx. So import styles from /css/icon.module.css. And right here I use a class name of styles.icon, for example. Let me target .icon within our icon.module.css, and let's use a font size of 2 rem, so you just see how this works. And as you can see now, our icons are a little bit bigger. And the reason for this is that React icons are essentially just fonts if you want to think about it like that. So I can use font size to increase the size of an icon from React icons. And I'm going to use 1.2 or 1.3 rem in our case. Let's actually use 1.5 rem. So this looks pretty good to me. Now I would also like to have a little bit of padding into every single direction of maybe 10 pixels. I want to have a border of 1 pixel, solid, and I want to use a variable that is our -- main color. Or I want to use this variable as a color, to be precise. So now we're having this effect. I want to have a border minus radius of 50%, so the border is completely round. Now I also want to use display flex, justify content center, align item center to align the icon in the center. And for the width, I'm just going to use fit content like so. And now we're getting this effect. And I actually think the icon could be a little bit smaller, so I'm just going to use 1.4. And I think this looks pretty good. Now I also want to make sure that this right here is a link, because I also want to redirect the user later on to a different page. So I'm going to import the link from React routed DOM like so. So we're getting this effect. And now we are having this effect, and we should actually also change the color. So icon.module.css, let's use a color of var of dash dash main minus color. We're getting this effect right here. And actually, I think I'm just going to use 1.2 rem. And we're getting this effect, and I think this looks pretty good. Now, for every single social icon, we also need to accept the link. So where should this link point to? And we're going to say 2 is going to be equal to this link that we pass as a prop later on. And for the target, I'm also going to use underline blank. So we open this page within a new tab. Now, this is what our page looks like, but I want to have those icons next to each other. And now we will do that within our home page. So I give this div right here a class, or a class name of styles.icon container. Within our home.module.css, right here, I'm going to create the icon container, display flex, gap 20 pixels. Let me show it to you. And maybe 20 pixels is a little bit too much, so let's probably use 13, like so. We're getting this effect, and this looks pretty good, but I also want to have a little bit more margin to the bottom of the buttons or to the top of the icon container. Doesn't matter, but I'm going to use for the button container, since I have a margin top already over there, I'm going to add a margin bottom of also 30 pixels. And now we're having this effect right here. Now I of course also need to define a link. So let me just use a placeholder, instagram.com. It doesn't really matter too much. Feel free, if you want to create this web page for real, feel free to use real links, but in our case, we're just going to link to Instagram for every single one. So 2 is going to be equal, or link is going to be equal because that was our property name, to Instagram. And let me just use the same link for all of those ones. Of course, you could use YouTube and Twitter right here. Let's go to our page. Let's press this one, and this should redirect us to Instagram within a new tab, and it does. And same goes for the other two, because we're linking to Instagram when clicking every single icon. And at this point, the only thing that is missing is a working button. So when we click this button at the moment, nothing is really happening. And in our case, we want to redirect the user to our team and our contact page. So I'm going to create the functions that we defined previously right here. And we can do so by saying that we create a navigate hook, or that we use the navigate hook to create navigation. So const navigate is going to be equal to use navigate, like so. And once the user clicks on the first button, for example, we want to call handle go to about. And right here, we can just call navigate and say, let's go to /team. And the same now goes for handle go to contact. So we can just paste this navigate hook right here, or this navigate variable. And in this case, we're going to redirect to contact. Let me save that one. Once we click about, you can see that we're going to the about page, so to our team page, and contact, we're getting to our contact page. Let's keep going by creating the teams section. So let's go to teams.jsx. Right here, I want to create a div where we will display our team and have a heading as well as a text. For the heading and the text, I will create a separate component because I want to use the exact same heading later on for our contact page as well. So I'm going to go to components. I create heading.jsx as a component. Const heading is going to be equal to an arrow function. I'm going to return a div for now. Export default heading. And now I will use this heading on our contact page and on our team page. So heading right here. I need to import that one from /components/heading. And now I will do the exact same already for our contact page, because we need to do this later on anyways. So heading right here, and it's going to be a slide closing tag. Now I will also pass some props. The first one is going to be the heading, which is going to be equal to our team, for example. And then I will also pass a text, for example, that will be equal to welcome to our little team. It doesn't matter too much. And now let's create this heading. So heading.jsx, we get props. The first one is going to be the heading, and the second one is going to be the text. Our heading will be within nh1. So I'm just going to output the heading right here, and our text will be right below instead of a paragraph, like so. Let's take a look at the page. So let's go to team. You can see that we're having this effect right here. This obviously doesn't look too good yet, but we can fix it in a second by creating styles for our heading. So I'm going to say import styles from, and now we need to create a CSS file. So heading.module.css, and I'm going to import the styles for heading.jsx from /css/heading.module.css. For the first one, I'm going to use a class name of styles.heading, and for the second one, I'm going to use a class name of styles.text. So I need to create those classes, so .heading and .text. That one will have a color of var of -- main color, I think, and this one will have a color of var of -- main color as well. So as you can see, we're getting this effect. For this entire component, I want to use a container. So .container, I want to have text align of center. Text align of center like so. And I need to use this container for the div. So class name styles.container. Let's save that one. So we're now having our heading aligned to the center. And maybe I want to have a little bit more margin to the top of our text. So for text, I say margin top of 10 pixels, for example. So now we're getting this effect. So now right below our heading on the team page, I want to have a couple of cards, and every card should display one single team member. So I'm going to create another div, and inside of this div, I will have all of those cards. So I'm going to create a new component, card.jsx const card is going to be equal to an arrow function. I'm going to return a div for now, export default card. And now I will use this card 4 times because we will have 4 team members later on. So right here, I have 4 cards, and every single card will accept as a prop an image, a name, a description, and for now, this is going to be it. Now, inside of this card, we're going to use an image tag. The source is going to be equal to the image that we accept right here as a prop. Right below, I want to have a paragraph. Inside of this paragraph, I want to display the name of the person, and right below, I will display the description. I also want to have an icon container that displays all of the social icons. So I can just, again, reuse our social icon component by saying social icon. And I want to have them 3 times, like so. Every social icon component expects to get a link and an icon. So I somehow need to pass that icon from our team component to our card component, and from our card component to our social icon component, as you can see. So icon and link. So I can do so by saying icon is going to be equal to icon and link is going to be equal to link. In our case, this is not enough because we have 3 different links. So we need to accept 3 different links right here as well. The first one should be our Insta link. The second one should be our Twitter link. So I need to say this here is Twitter link. And this one is YouTube link. And this here can also not only be an icon, but this in fact needs to be an Insta icon, a YouTube icon, and a Twitter icon. And now I need to accept all of those ones as props as well. So I need Insta icon, Insta link, YouTube icon, YouTube link, and Twitter icon, and Twitter link. So you can see that we are just passing a lot of props from top to bottom right now. So first of all, let's just copy all of those props and let's use them when creating a card. So team.jsx, I'm going to use all of those props right here. Image is going to be equal to an image. We don't have this image yet, so let's just keep this empty. Our name is going to be equal to Anna, for example. Description is going to be equal to CEO, for example. Insert icon, let's leave that empty for now. Same goes for this, for this, for this, for this, and for this. So now we first need to get an image, and we maybe want to use an image from our images folder. So right here, let's use team1.jpg. So import team1 from /images/team1.jpg. And let's also just import every single image because we will need them later on anyways. So team1, 2, 3, and 4. So now we can just use team1 right here. We also need to get the Insta icon as well as the Instagram link. So let's go to our homepage because I think we defined them already here. So let's just import FA Instagram, FA YouTube, FA Twitter. And let's also import them right here. And now I'm going to use FA Instagram for our Insta icon, like so. I'm going to use FA YouTube for our YouTube icon, like so. And I'm going to use FAX Twitter for our Twitter icon. Now for the link, let me just copy the link that we used right here. So let's just always pass Instagram. Of course, in a real app, you would use a different link for every single person that links every single individual Instagram profile. So it would, for example, be something like Instagram.com/Anne, whatever, doesn't matter, but you get the idea. And then for the second card, for example, if the card is for Peter, you would use something like /Peter, for example. But you get the idea. You would use individual links for every single person. And you could, of course, also use individual icons, but in our case, it might make more sense to use the exact same icons for every single person, because Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter should look the exact same for everyone. Now for the YouTube link, let's also just make this simple and let's use Instagram as a placeholder link. Let's save this one. And now I'm just going to copy, paste this card a couple of times. And now we should already see the effect. But as you can see, our entire style is pretty off because we did not style this card yet. So let's style the card right now. Let's go to card.jsx. Let's create a style. So card.module.css. And for our card, so for this entire card, let's first of all say that we want to use a class name of styles.container. We don't have the styles object yet, so import styles from /css/ and now we're going to get our card.module.css. First of all, we should create a container. So .container will have a width of 100%, but a max width of maybe 400 pixels. I want to have a little bit of padding of maybe 30 pixels, a border minus radius of 10 pixels, a box minus shadow of 10 pixels, 10 pixels, 15 pixels, RGBA 0000.4. So we're going to get a black box shadow. And right now we're only defining the outline. So we're only defining this right here. You can see that our image takes up way too much space. And the reason for this is that we defined the width for our container, but we did not yet say that the image should only take up 100% of the width, of the available width, so of the container width. So we should probably do that next. So let's give our image a class name of styles.image, for example. Now let's target .image and let's just say take up 100% of the available space, but don't take up more than 100% of the available space. And as you can see now, the image only takes up 100% of the available space. Also, I think this entire card is a little bit too big, so I'm going to say that the width right here is going to be 250 pixels. For padding, I'm probably going to use 40 pixels. So we're having this effect. For our image, I'm going to use a width of 100%, but I'm going to use an aspect ratio of 1:1 and object fit of cover, so it doesn't stretch. And now we're getting this cool effect. I also want to have a border minus a radius of maybe 10 pixels as well. So we're getting this effect. And now I want to have everything else centered. So I'm going to use text align of center by default. So now our text is centered. And now we should also use a class for our name and a class for our text. So styles.name. And for the description, let's use class name of styles.description, for example. So our .name class should have a font weight of bold, a font size of 1.2 rem, and maybe a color of bar -- main minus color. So we're getting this effect right now. And .description should be a lot smaller. So font size 0.8 rem, for example. I want to have a color, and maybe I'm just going to use gray. And actually, I think this right here looks already pretty good. Now I also want to have the icons aligned next to each other. So we can create an icon container right here. So class name styles.icon container. I'm going to save that icon container and paste it in here. And I'll say display is going to be flex, gap 10 pixels, justify content center. So now everything is centered, as you can see. And I want to use a margin top of maybe 20 pixels. So this is the effect that we are looking for. And as you can see, if we are clicking on this icon, this also seems to work. Even though we're always getting redirected to Instagram, but that was the behavior that we just defined. So this seems to work as well. And now, of course, I want to have those cards next to each other and I want to use different images. So this is pretty simple. We are pretty much done with our card because we do not want to modify our card to create all of the other styles from this point on, because that is the responsibility of our team section. So we are going to go in here and say class name styles dot card container. We don't have a style sheet yet for team, so we need to create that one. So instead of our CSS folder, let's create team.module.css. We're going to take this card container and target that one. This place is going to be flex justify content space between. Let me show you. Styles is not defined. Okay, that is a problem because we did not import it yet. So import styles from /css/team.module.css. So now style should be defined and you can see we're getting this result. But maybe the width of this container is a little bit too much. So let me go and use width of 70%. I also want to have a margin of auto, so it's centered. And I want to use a little bit of margin to the top and I want to have it centered. So top, I'm going to use 50 pixels, right auto, 0 bottom, and auto right here. So left auto. Let me show you. So this is what this looks like. And now I want to use different images and different text. So what can I do? I can just go ahead and now I can say this here is team 2, team 3, and team 4. So now we use different images and maybe there's going to be Peter, Adam, and whatever. It doesn't really matter too much. So Peter, programming, Steven, sports, science, and let's use biochemistry for Paul. And now we have those 3 persons. Now let's say our entire team section will have a little bit more margin to the top. So I can just create right here another style of styles.container, for example. So team.module.css will get the container class that will add a margin top of maybe 100 pixels. And I think this looks pretty much all right. Now the contact page is still left, so let's create the contact page next. Let's save all of this and close this so this looks a little bit better. And let's go to the contact.jsx page. Right here again, we can also use the header or the heading right here that we created previously for our team page. And we also need to use heading right here. This one is responsible for displaying contact us and the text is going to be equal to feel free to ask us anything, for example. Let's save this one. Let's go to contact and you can see that we're getting this result. And right below, I now want to display a contact page or an input field essentially. And that is pretty simple. Let's first of all create a couple of input fields for name, email, and message. So let's create a new component, input.jsx const input is going to be equal to this arrow function. We are going to return an input at this point and export default input. What does a normal input field need? It needs a type, of course, and maybe this type is different for every single input field. So let's say type will be expected via props. We maybe also want to expect a placeholder. So we can define different placeholders for all of the different input fields like so. We need to expect a value and we need to expect a set function to set this value, like set email, set username, and so on. And we're going to say that the value is going to be equal to the value that we expect via props. And on change, we're going to get an event and we're going to call set value and pass e.target.value. So the value that the user entered right here. Now let's test this. So on our contact page, let's create another div for our form. And I'm going to import our input right here that we created. And this input expects a couple of different props. So let's create 2 imports for now. So you can see we're not seeing anything. So first of all, the type is going to be equal to text or to email for the first one. Or let's actually use text because that one will be responsible for the name. Placeholder will be full name, for example. Now let me just copy that one, paste it in here. This type will be of type email and the placeholder will be email. So we're getting this effect, so it seems to work up to this point, but now we also need to keep track of the state. So const name set name is equal to use state. We're going to initialize with an empty string. Const email set email is going to be equal to use state. We're going to initialize with an empty string again. And for the value, I'm now going to pass my name right here. And for set value, I'll pass our set name function right here. And for our email, the value is going to be email, and set value is going to be equal to set email. So now we should be able to track all of this. But of course, the input fields look absolutely terrible. So we need to create a style sheet for our input.jsx. So input.module.css, we need to import that one within our JSX component. So import styles from /css/input.module.css. And now let's just say that our input has a class name of styles.input, for example. And .input will, for example, have a width of 100%, padding 10 pixels, outline of none, border of 1 pixel, solid, and we are going to use --main minus color, I think was the name. So we're getting this effect right here. For the border radius, let me use 5 pixels. And actually, I think I'm just going to use some form of light gray. Maybe like this. And I think this could actually even look a little bit better. Maybe it's going to be a little bit darker than that. But I think this should work. And now let me also use a text area. So let's create a new component. Text area.jsx const text area is going to be equal to this arrow function. I'm going to return a text area like so. Export default text area. And again, the text area is actually pretty similar to the input. We are just going to expect a placeholder, a value, and a set value. But we do not need a type because the text area is always a text area. So placeholder is going to be equal to placeholder. Value is going to be equal to value. Set value is going to be, or onChange to be precise, going to be equal to set value e.target.value. So this is actually pretty much the same. And actually, let me also just use the same style sheet because I think it's probably pretty unnecessary to get a different style sheet for our text area since it's basically an input field. So import styles from /input.module.css, and as a class name, I'm just going to use styles.textArea. Let me copy that one, and right below .input, let me create .textArea. I'm going to use the probably exact same styles, but I'm going to say that the height is 250 pixels. So now let me import the text area within our contact.jsx. So right below text area, like so. Again, we need a state to keep track of the message. So const message set message is going to be equal to use state. And the value for our text area is going to be message. And set value is going to be equal to set message. The placeholder is going to be equal to message, for example. And I'm not sure whether there's something missing. Let's take a look. But yeah, we defined all of the props. So this should work. So now this is the effect. And maybe the text area is a little bit too high. Let's use 180, for example. And I think this is okay. So now obviously this form is way too big, but we should not change the input field to change that and set a certain width for our input field. But we should use the container of the input field to restrict the width, because the input field always takes up 100% of the container width. And if we have a smaller container, then we can therefore limit the width of the input field. So class name styles.formContainer. And now, of course, I need to import styles. So we need to create a style sheet for our contact.jsx. So instead of our CSS folder, let's say contact.module.css. I'm going to create .formContainer. I say width is going to be equal to 100%, but I will have a max width of 500 pixels. So let me save that one. We need to import the styles. So import styles from /css/contact.module.css. So we're importing our style shield. And now you can see this is the effect that we're getting. Also for the text area, I want to have a resize of none because I think this resize looks pretty bad. So input.module.css resize none. So now it's not possible to resize the text area anymore. Now I want to have this entire form centered, and I want to have a little bit of gap between those individual input elements. So contact.module.css, let's use a margin of auto so it's centered. And I want to use display of flex, but flex direction of column. So nothing should change, but now I can use the gap property, since this is a flex box, of 10 pixels, for example. For this entire form, I want to have a little bit of margin to the top. So margin minus top 50 pixels. That's the effect that we're getting. And actually, I think that the max width of 500 pixels is a little bit too much, so let's use 400. And I think this looks a little bit better. Right below, I would also like to have a button. So I'm just going to import a button that we already defined. So contact.jsx, right below, let's use a button like so. What does our button expect? Let's go to button.jsx. So let's take a look at the component, and we need text, on click, and we need to define outline. So whether it's an outline button or not. Within our contact.jsx, let's at least has text and on click. Text is going to be equal to submit form, and on click is going to be equal to handle submit. We need to define this method, const handle submit, which is going to be equal to an empty arrow function. And actually this will stay an empty arrow function because usually you would need a backend to store the data somewhere. Since we do not have this backend, we're just going to use a placeholder function. And as you can see, this is what the button looks like. So right below this form container, I'm going to create another div. And inside of this div, I want to have p of name. So npc codes is the name, for example. And I want to have a little bit of info text, the best coding channel out there. So I'm going to save that one. So we are having this right here, but I want to have this centered as well. So let me give that one a class name of styles.info container. This here will have a class name of styles.name. Right below, I'm going to use class name of styles.info. So let me give that info container within our contact.module.css. So I'm going to use text align of center to align the items to the center, so this works. Now I'm going to use a margin top of maybe 20 pixels, like so. And now let me also style the name and the info. So dot name, font weight, bold, font size 2 rem, color var dash dash main minus color. And actually I think this is a little bit too big, so I'm going to use 1.5 rem. So I think this looks pretty good. And now I also want to use a different color for this paragraph. And in fact, I'm going to take a look at my index.css. We didn't use this accent color yet, so maybe let's use that one for .info color var dash dash accent minus color, like so. And this actually looks terrible, so I'm probably not going to use that one. I'm just going to use gray, and I'll take a lighter version of gray. Let's use a slightly darker value and a font weight of bold and a font size of 0.9 rem. And actually for info, I'm just going to say coding channel, for example. Let me save that one, and we're getting this effect right here. And actually it's a little bit too dark right now, so I'm going to go slightly lighter. So this is the effect that we're getting right now. Actually this looks, actually let me remove that right here. And I'm going to use an even slightly lighter gray, and I'm going to use 1.7. So now this looks kind of right. Obviously this is not a 10 out of 10, but this works. And now I also want to have the icons to the bottom. So maybe the social media icons for the entire company. And we can do so by just creating another div. And again, we need to import our icon component that we created previously. So we can actually just go to our homepage and just copy this icon component right here. So right here, like so. Of course, we need to import social icon, and we need to import the icons. So let's just go to our homepage again and just copy Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and social icon. So let's copy, paste that one to the top right here, and now everything should work. We are seeing those icons right here, but of course we also need to create a wrapper div that has a class name of styles.iconContainer, like so. And for the icon container, let's go to contact.module.css. We're going to have display flex, gap 10 pixels, and justify content center, for example. So now we're getting this effect. And let's also have some margin top of 20 pixels. And I think this here is kind of alright. This entire contact form could also need some space to the top. So I'm just going to go to contact.jsx. Let me take a look for this entire div. I'm going to create a class name of styles.container. Let's say .container will get, so .container will get margin top. And actually I want to use the same margin that I've used for team. So I'm going to go to our team.module.css and I'm just going to copy that line right here. So contact.module.css container will have a margin top of 100 pixels, like so. So now you can see this is our team page and this is our contact page. And if you take a look at the page, this is now our home page, this is our team page, and this is our contact page. And we just used React to create all of this within probably 1.5 hours.